The sun rose over Africa not as a sudden blaze, but as a slow unveiling, like a storyteller lifting a veil from an ancient face. First came the pale gold along the horizon, then the deeper amber that spilled across plains, rivers, and forests. This land had seen more dawns than memory could count. Long before maps tried to cage it with lines, Africa breathed on its own terms, shaping life with fire, water, wind, and time. In the savanna, grasslands stretched endlessly, bending under the morning breeze like a living sea. Acacia trees stood scattered, their flat crowns silhouetted against the brightening sky. Giraffes moved between them with quiet elegance, their long necks swaying gently as they reached for tender leaves. Below, zebras grazed in loose herds, their black and white stripes blurring into patterns that confused predators and delighted the eye. A lioness watched from a distance, muscles coiled, patience carved into her bones by generations of hunters before her. Here, survival was not cruel, it was precise. As the sun climbed higher, the savanna warmed, releasing the scent of dry earth and grass. Insects hummed into life, and birds filled the air with sharp calls and melodic notes. A herd of elephants approached a waterhole, their massive feet pressing deep impressions into the soil. The matriarch led them, her ears torn slightly at the edges, her eyes carrying decades of memory. She remembered droughts that cracked the land and floods that turned plains into shallow seas. She remembered paths to hidden water and the taste of mineral-rich soil. Her memory was the library of the herd, more reliable than any map. Far to the north, the land transformed into the Sahara, a vast ocean of sand and stone. From above, dunes looked like frozen waves, their crests sculpted by wind into perfect curves. The desert appeared empty, but life here was simply quieter, more deliberate. At dawn and dusk, fennec foxes emerged, their oversized ears tuned to the faint sounds of prey beneath the sand. Beetles rolled balls of dung across the desert floor, guided by the stars. Nomadic people moved with the seasons, their camels stepping steadily across distances that would exhaust machines. The desert taught patience and respect. Those who rushed were swallowed by heat and silence. The Sahara had not always been dry. Hidden beneath its sands lay the memory of rivers, lakes, and green valleys. Ancient rock art depicted giraffes, crocodiles, and swimmers, proof that Africa's face had changed many times before. Climate reshaped the continent again and again, but life adapted, retreating, returning, evolving. Change was not the enemy here, it was the rule. To the west, the land softened into forests and coastal plains. Mangroves tangled their roots along the edges of rivers, where freshwater met the sea. These forests were nurseries, protecting young fish and filtering the water with quiet efficiency. Fishermen moved through narrow channels in wooden boats, reading the tides the way others read clocks. The Atlantic waves crashed beyond, carrying stories of trade, migration, and loss. Along these coasts, Africa had always been connected to the wider world, long before modern ports and shipping lanes. Deep in Central Africa lay the Congo Basin, one of the planet's great green hearts. From the air, it looked endless, a dense carpet of trees stretching to the horizon. Inside, the forest was dim and alive, layered with sound. Rain drummed on leaves, insects buzzed like living machinery, and unseen animals moved through undergrowth with soft urgency. Gorillas fed quietly in clearings, their immense strength paired with gentle social bonds. Chimpanzees used tools, passing knowledge from parent to child. Here, evolution felt close, almost visible, as if humanity's own beginnings lingered in the shadows. Rivers threaded through the forest like veins. The Congo River itself moved with unstoppable force, carrying water from the continent's interior toward the ocean. Villages lined its banks, their lives synchronized with its rise and fall. Children learned to swim almost as soon as they could walk. Fish traps were set with techniques refined over centuries. The river was road, pantry, and storybook all at once. In the east, the land rose dramatically. The Great Rift Valley cut through the continent like a scar left by the Earth's slow, powerful movements. Volcanoes loomed above fertile soils, their past eruptions enriching the land. Lakes filled the rift's depths, some fresh, some so salty that only specialized life could survive. Flamingos gathered by the thousands, painting the shores pink as they fed on algae. Their reflections shimmered in the heat, turning the lake into a living mirror. These highlands were also the cradle of humanity. Fossils buried in ancient sediments told a story millions of years old. Here, early human ancestors walked upright, shaped by changing landscapes that rewarded curiosity and endurance. Stone tools lay preserved in the ground, silent evidence of minds learning to shape the world. Africa was not just a place where life survived, it was where humanity began its long conversation with nature. Further south, the land opened again into wide plains and rugged coastlines. The Kalahari Desert spread across parts of Botswana and Namibia, not a desert of endless dunes, but a mosaic of dry grasslands, salt pans, and scrub. After rare rains, the land transformed almost overnight. Seeds dormant for years burst into life. Antelope appeared as if summoned, following ancient instincts. Predators followed them, and the cycle resumed with breathtaking speed. Along the southern coasts, cold and warm ocean currents collided, creating waters rich with life. Whales migrated along these shores, their massive bodies breaching in slow-motion arcs. Great white sharks patrolled beneath the surface, drawn by seals and fish. On land, penguins waddled along beaches under a sun that seemed out of place for such creatures. Africa delighted in contradictions, refusing to fit into simple categories. Human cultures across the continent were as diverse as its landscapes. From the Maasai herders of East Africa to the Tuareg of the Sahara, from forest-dwelling communities in the Congo to coastal traders of the Swahili coast, people adapted their lives to the rhythms of their environment. Oral histories carried knowledge across generations, encoded in songs, proverbs, and rituals. These stories taught when to plant, where to find water, how to live together. They were libraries spoken aloud, flexible and alive. Yet Africa's story also carried deep scars. The arrival of foreign powers brought exploitation, borders drawn without regard for land or people, and the forced movement of millions. Wildlife was hunted not for survival, but for profit. Forests were cut, mines dug, and rivers poisoned. The continent that had given so much to the world often received little in return. Still, Africa endured. Communities resisted, adapted, and reclaimed their voices. In modern times, Africa stood at a crossroads. Cities grew rapidly, their skylines rising where open land once lay. Innovation thrived alongside tradition. Solar panels gleamed in remote villages, bringing light without smoke. Conservation areas expanded, protecting animals whose ancestors had roamed freely. Rangers risked their lives to guard elephants and rhinos from poachers, understanding that these creatures were not just symbols, but keystones in fragile ecosystems. Climate change cast a long shadow. Droughts intensified in some regions, floods worsened in others. Farmers watched the skies with concern, reading signs that no longer followed old patterns. Yet resilience remained Africa's quiet strength. New farming techniques blended traditional knowledge with modern science. Communities restored degraded land, planting trees that anchored soil and cooled the air. Hope grew not from grand promises, but from countless small actions. At night, Africa transformed again. The heat softened, and the stars emerged in overwhelming numbers. In places far from city lights, the Milky Way stretched clearly across the sky, a river of light echoing the rivers below. Hyenas laughed in the distance, their calls rising and falling. Somewhere, a drumbeat carried across the dark, marking a celebration, a birth, or a remembrance. Firelight flickered on faces as stories were told, linking the present to ancestors and to those yet unborn. Africa was not a single story, but millions layered together. It was ancient rock and newborn life, harsh deserts and generous rivers, pain and joy intertwined. To understand it was not to reduce it to stereotypes of wildlife or struggle, but to see its complexity, its power, and its enduring influence on the planet. The continent continued to change, as it always had, shaped by forces both natural and human. As dawn returned once more, the cycle began again. The sun rose over forests, deserts, mountains, and seas, illuminating a land that had witnessed the birth of humanity and still held countless untold stories. Africa did not ask to be simplified or saved. It asked to be understood, respected, and listened to. And for those who truly listened, it offered a story as deep and vast as time itself.